Series of 3 seminars on mobile. Last month we did sort of understanding mobile, where we kind of got into the basics. Today we're going to get into actually making your site mobile, concepts and the things you need to know to make that next step from yes I want to now how do I do it. And next month we're going to actually take WordPress by itself and talk about everything you can do with WordPress in terms of responsive design and mobile. So I wasn't sure how I was going to split it up last month when I talked about it, but I realized that WordPress was going to take the whole time by itself, and so I needed to split it up that way. And the WordPress is going to make more sense if you understand what we're going to do today. So I really needed to do it in this order in order to get you to the point where the WordPress stuff made more sense. There's going to be an ebook for the whole series, one big, long, giant ebook for the whole series. It has everything in it plus more. It's now sitting at about 50 pages. I haven't done the WordPress part yet. So it's going to be a big book. And the video for last month is online at the Oceanside Chamber's channel. So just type YouTube Oceanside Chamber and you'll see the video there from last month, and you can watch that video. Okay? And this video will be online too. Okay, well, yeah, I already did all that. I sometimes get ahead of my slides. Okay, today, this is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about site converters and builders, so that you understand what they are, and whether they might or might not be appropriate to you. We're going to look at the pros and cons of them. We're going to give you Google's viewpoint of them, and talk about Google's requirements in respect to them, so that you'll understand how Google sees these kinds of tools, and how you can use those tools and still stay within Google's good graces. Then we're going to dive into responsive design, which of course Google prefers above all else. It's their #1 preference is responsive design. So if we're going to move forward with our mobile sites into the future, we're going to have to play Google's game, and that's going to be responsive design. So whatever you do, ultimately, even if you take a quick shortcut and use these converters to get you going right now today, someday you're going to have to come back to responsive design and have your website converted. And then we're going to talk about what you need to know as a consumer of responsive design. We're not going to get into the technical details. We're going to give you enough knowledge, hopefully, so that you can tell if somebody's really doing that for you. So that you can look at what they're doing and go, you're pulling my leg, and no, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. So that's a critical thing that we try to teach here, is to give you enough information so that you can be a good consumer of this without having to be a techie, on top of that. And if you want to go farther, that's all great. I have a couple of books that I have listed in there. So if you do want to know more about responsive design and how it relates to mobile, there's 2 good books listed in there. They are considered the Bibles of responsive design and mobile. They're put out by a company called A Book Apart, which is like one of the major proponents. One of the guy who's like the head owner of that company is considered one of the top people in style sheet development stuff. He's been on the board of W3C. He's like big in that world. So he's really somebody to listen to. Okay. Okay, we're going to start out right off with site converters. I'm going to do a quick review of 3 of them. These were kind of like the top ranking ones. You have Bemobilize, Doodah Mobile, and Mobilize Today. And then we're going to evaluate. Okay, when you suck in your website, it's going to look something like this. I took Right Start Websites and sucked it in. This is my default thing that I got. Notice that it didn't get the right logo, so that means I'm going to have to fix that. It grabbed some other logo that was on the page. I guess it grabbed it because it was the right size. Gee, oh, that one's the right size. Boom, put that in there. This particular tool pretty much doesn't give you a lot of layout options, and but it does give you the basic idea of being thumb friendly. Their tool looks like this. They do have a layout design, menu content. They have a selection of plugins you can put in, like mapping and things like that. You can actually edit the style sheet. You can put in some JavaScript. And they have a little analytics section. And you can create a special page. So they have a lot of tools. I mean, it's a well thought out and organized converter. So there's nothing really wrong with it. The next one, okay, Mobilized. It does the conversion very fast. It has good tools. It does require a separate hosting fee, which now you're going to be hosting in 2 locations. It doesn't host it, your hosting, it's a separate hosting. And so there's a charge. The monthly charge, I think it's like $5 or $6 a month to host your site on their system. And then you have to get involved in redirection tools. That's the key that we're going to talk about later on in playing properly with Google, is the redirection tools and doing that correctly. Doesn't look like they covered everything as well as what they do on Google. It would have been nice if they would have taken Google's recommendations and kind of walked you through everything. They didn't do that. They just basically said, paste this on the page and you're done. It's not that simple. Okay, it's going to take a little more than that to do it really right and keep Google happy. So they really needed to boost that part of their system and kind of walk you through that. Do.Mobile, it came up with a little nicer looking, but they still had trouble with the graphic. They still brought in the wrong graphic. They brought in the other one. I have 2 graphics up in the corner, one of SonicWebTech and one SonicSpider, and they grabbed the other one. They're both the exact same size, sitting right next to each other. It's interesting how one grabbed one and one grabbed the other. They added more spaces. They didn't take more of the page, but it does look nice. It presents well. They have what looks like a simpler system, but it's really not. When they click layout, you get all these layout options here. When you click style, they have all kinds of different styles and color schemes and sort of like themes that you can choose from. Then you can go, you click this and you get a whole options of ways you can do pages. You can change the header and put a different graphic up the top. So really it comes down, they organized it differently, but it comes out to the same kinds of tools. The only thing that's really missing here that was in the other one, and that is the little kind of widgets that you can select and plop in there, like the phone widget and stuff. But notice one thing that's missing here and here was it didn't put in a place for somebody to find you and to call you. And that's a big mistake, because that's one of the key things mobile wants. And I feel that they kind of missed the boat on that, because that's really a biggie for mobile people, is to be able to, you know, push a button and call you, and push a button and find you on the map. So that was really a tool that's missing. So, similar issues. They have more layouts, a lot more selection of layouts, customization. They did have redirecting tools, and they do charge the extra hosting fee. So a lot of similarities, just a different way to put it in the package, so to speak, but a lot of similarities. Okay, Mobilize today. Actually, they just said, forget the image business. We're not going to bother with that. We're just going to put your name up there. That might be a little more honest, since they wasn't able to figure out which is the right graphic anyway. They did put everything in the menu here, which you notice the other ones had more options, which I thought was kind of better. Their space is a little smaller for big thumbs, which might be good or bad. They do have a whole bunch of options that allow you to change things. They do have a whole widget selection so that you can drop in your map and you can drop in your phone button and stuff. So you can drop that stuff in. I could change the colors just to red, so that's what happens when you do red. So a lot of the same kinds of tools. Layout, colors, CSS, JavaScript, header. They do have this interesting thing where they show you your website so that you can kind of look at both at the same time. I don't know if that was necessarily better or not. I guess you'd have to work with it to see if that really helped you. Since I have multiple screens, that isn't an issue for me because I have, I have 3 screens that I work with simultaneously, so I have plenty of real estate on my computer. Anyway, really a lot of the same things. Similar issues. They have the widget library, they have the redirection tools. They do have a free basic entry level, so you can try it free, unlimited. You know, if you stay with the basics, it's free. And then if you go beyond that, there's additional hosting services, where they also let you sort of change your domain, sort of control how your domain looks and stuff too. None of these gave you a lot of redirection tools in terms of looking at the Google rules and comparing that to what they were doing. They kind of left you kind of hanging to figure that out yourself, which I really think they need to beef that up. Okay, site builders now don't suck in your website. They say, okay, let's start from scratch, which is good and bad, okay? You can do a little better targeting. You don't have to deal with all the stuff from your other sites so much, and since it's going to be a separate site, you don't have to worry about that, but that's its own problem too, we'll get into. Oops, wrong way. Come on. So here is, I just put my name, I put in a couple of information in there's a little sheet, and this is what you got to start off with. Notice that it did do a couple really cool things. You've got email, you've got your phone number you tap, and you've got Google Maps right there, right up front. So that's a good start right there, based on what a mobile user is going to want to know right off the bat. So that puts it in there as a default thing, which the others did not. They did have, well, the company's called PagePart, by the way. They did have, they have a lot of widgets that you can select from and add in there. It's a huge, I mean, each one of these has dozens of widgets that you can add. So you can just literally build a site with widgets, basically. So it was really cool. I put a few items together and came up with this. Spent about 25 minutes, and I added a logo. I just grabbed something I had lying around. I put in some text. I pointed this to our blog versus, they have an internal blog that you can use. In other words, you don't connect it to your blog. They have a little blogging tool that they can use. So I connected that. I actually connected the map to where we were at. So I connected all the pieces, so to speak. I didn't do anything extra. I didn't use any of the widgets other than I just sort of connected all the pieces so they all worked correctly. And that's what I came up with. Okay, let's look at them all together, sort of pros and cons. The pros, okay, it's faster, non-technical way to have a mobile-friendly site. There are some free trials and free service levels on many of these. Matter of fact, the PagePart that one we just saw is entirely free for the moment. Entirely free. They're in sort of like beta. So they're just giving it to everybody free. That's good and bad. It's good because it's free, but it's bad because if they go out of business, you're left hanging. So I don't know how to, but that's the way this whole industry is, No matter what you do, you may be left standing without anything at some point in time. So it's always a gamble. They have some customizations are possible, which is good. You can kind of jazz it up and add things that are more mobile specific. And they almost all allow you to hire somebody in their company to really do it for you. Literally. They have customization services where you can go click and pay money. Most of them, I looked at the prices for like basic customization. You were looking at like $300 to $400 to get kind of your first level. Okay, that's what you were looking at in terms of customization services. Cons. They don't look alike. It's going to be difficult to make it look like your other sites. So that may be a disruption in terms of your brand, because one of the things you want to do with your business is brand it. As I mentioned earlier, most of them do not place emphasis on the phone and location, which should be an emphasis for all your mobile sites. The only one that did that was PagePart. Replication causes some parts of your sites to be confusing between your desktop version and your mobile version. Getting those two to sync and keep them synced is going to be a challenge. You have to remember that Google's going to see them as one site due to the redirection. So you can imagine for a moment the confusion Google's going to have between routing somebody to the page that might not exist on your mobile site, or routing somebody to a page that exists on your mobile site that might not exist on your desktop site. So there's a problem in which you're going to have to sort of play by Google's rules. This, of course, will require extra work. So if you're thinking instant, I would kind of take that off the table. It's not really instant. If you're going to do it right, it's going to take some extra work. If you do it yourself, obviously less cost. So, you know, there's some factors there. You're always going to deal with some extra hosting, because they're going to host it on their site. And there are possible Google issues, which we're going to get into. We're going to get into the Google issues all together.
John, is the extra hosting necessary, or is it just a
If you
part of
go
their
the
business?
custom route, if you go the custom route, you can literally buy it and put it on your own site. That's going to cost you the $300 or $400 if you go the custom route. But if you don't go that route, then yes, the hosting the hosting and the redirection is going to be the way you have to go. So yes, some of them allow you to buy the site and then put it on your own. Okay, now we're going to talk about Google's recommendations in all of this. First and foremost, Google says, right, number one, that they support the industry best practices and web standards, which i.e. means responsive design and CSS3. That's what that means. Okay? They support the same HTML for both sites. In other words, a unified code base. This is their number one recommendation. That leads to cleaner indexing, consistent routing to resources, and then their number two, down, you know, their last one of their base recommendations is, well, if you must do separate sites, care must be taken. Care must be taken. And I'm going to show you what that means. We're actually going to go to that website a second and look at it. Here it is right here. It's developers.google.com webmasters/smartphone-sites. So it's right up here. It's developersgoogle.com/webmasters, which is where you would go anywhere for a lot of those things on Google, /smartphone-sites. We'll get you to this page. Okay, so here's their 1 and 2 that I've mentioned here. There's their 1 and 2 recommendations here. But to really understand what you're doing, you need to click over here on the left. You need to click redirects and user agent detection. Read that, and then read everything down from here. Okay, you just got to read it all and make sure you're doing it all. I'm not going to go through it today. It would take the rest of our time, but basically, if you do the separate sites, you need to know this, and this is what you need to follow. Okay, so make sure you read it, understand it, because if you don't, it's going to hurt your rankings. That's the bottom line. If you don't follow their recommendations, they're going to slap you. Okay. I mean, if you're doing the 2 sites, the mobile site and your site. If you're not doing recommendation 1, you're doing recommendation 2, you need to follow the rules. And they make it very clear that they will penalize you if you don't. Okay? So it's their ball game, and they're going to make sure you play it their way. Okay.
Can you read that very long URL again?
Okay. It's developers.google.com/webmasters, all one word, no spaces, no hyphens, just webmasters, plural, /smartphone-sites. That's it. You don't have to put the other thing on there. That's just one of the menu items here. That'll get you back to home, which is where you want to be. Not that one.
Not that home.
Not that home. This home, I'm sorry. Okay. Not found on Google. Hey, how can I help if you can't find it?
Can't find their own home.
I'll just use the back button to get to it then. There you go. Building mobile optimized websites. Okay, it should have been that home right there. Okay, anyway. Oh, no, it's actually this one right here. I was watching my own thing. So that's where you want to go to get that information, make sure you're playing by the rules. Okay. Now, let's move on to responsive design. Now, what we're going to do now is I'm going to go give you a 10,000-foot view of responsive design. I'm going to try to be as untechy as I possibly can so that you kind of get an idea of what it means and where it's going, and then give you some books to read if you want to do that, if you want to get in a little deeper. Some really great books from the top people in the field. And hopefully you will know enough to be able to talk to a web developer, if that's what you choose to do, and make sure that they're sticking to the rules, so to speak, sticking to the standards. Responsive design for mobile is better for SEO because Google prefers it, and it's easier to maintain consistent content and links. You don't have to work at that, it just comes with the package. You don't have to do all those other pages of Google's recommendations. Okay, all that you can ignore because you're doing recommendation number one. Therefore, responsive design is easier and cheaper, and it delivers more consistent user experience. Because that way, a user is not likely to ever get a page not found. Because it doesn't matter, it's always going to the same page and the same links. That's one of the problems with separate sites, you're going to get page not founds. And you've got to decide how to handle those. How do I handle that? Do I get page not found? Does it go back to the main website page? What does it do? So you're going to have to figure out how to handle it. Okay, what is responsive design? Basically, the definition is a flexible grid-based layout that responds to the viewing device. That's the definition. Okay, it uses scalable fonts and spacing based on browser context. In other words, it has to figure out what browser it's on, and then it scales the fonts and spacing and stuff. It has flexible image and media handling. It, again, detects where it's at and presents the proper scaling sizes of images, scaling and what type of video handler to use. And it uses media queries, and this is kind of the biggie. Media queries, that's really the magic bullet. Okay, the other is good. Media queries is what really tips the scale and turns you into a really responsive design. So, and that's only found in CSS3, so you have to be a browser that supports that. Which, going forward, they're all going to be supporting. And there's a chart coming up that I'll show you which browsers support it. So, here's your two books. If you were interested in reading more, it's already on your flyer, so you'll have to copy it down. I have a habit of doing that. I like to keep you from having to write too much, so I already got it down for you. It's right there. You can buy these. Book Apart is the publisher. Just go to bookapart.com and you can download it on your iPad, your phone, and you can read it online. You also get a PDF version. I think you can even buy a hardback. I'm not sure.
What is that?
Yeah, I know. Go figure. But they have particularly specialized in selling all their books so that they can be read on the Kindle and on any type of device. So they're really big on providing you all the devices formats so that you can download it on all your devices and read it on your tablet or phone or whatever. Okay, let's now dig into a little, hopefully as quasi-geekiness as I can be. Okay, one of the key things you want to learn is the EM unit. Okay, that's the unit you want to see when you look at the style sheet. You don't want to see PX or anything like that. You want to see EM. Okay, that way you're no longer using fixed pixels for sizing. Everything is relative to the browser and the container settings. So one EM would be considered the browser's default size. And 2EM would be considered twice the browser's default size. And don't ask me what EM and how they came up with EM. I have no idea. I looked for that. I couldn't find anybody that would say where the EM came from. Maybe if you find, let me know.
I know.
Oh, you do?
It's based on M, the width of an M, when you do it. And then there's another unit which is EN, which is based on the width of an N.
Oh, okay.
And so.
That's why I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
It probably has to do with typesetting, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So that's why I'm
Yeah,
looking
way
at
back when.
Yeah, way back when. I wasn't looking back far enough. Okay, good, thank you. I'll remember that. Okay, the next really critical item is media queries. These two together really take the cake. Basically, many styles are based on querying the device's features. What features does this device have? And then based on those features, and those features are listed in those books that I showed you. They're all different features. Those features then use that to apply styles only for those devices that support that feature. So that way you can very selectively have things show or not show, depending on whether the device can actually handle it or not. So you can wrap around a special kind of video or something, and you can actually set it up so only certain devices will display it, and anybody else just won't be there. So you can really control it. Media queries came to be with late CSS2, 2.1. So you have to at least support that to get media queries. Okay, CSS 2.1 or better. Okay, was that basic enough? Okay, we'll look at some examples.
Everybody knows what CSS is, right?
Cascading style sheets. This is the old way of doing it. Okay?
Say what?
Font size equals 24px. You're going to see those all over in the style sheet. The new way would have to be font size 1.5. Assuming the default device was 16 pixels, then you would have to put 1.5 EM. That would be how you would now write it. Okay? So that would allow the text to scale based on the size of the screen that you're looking at. So remember those others that we were looking at where my titles were so huge? That was a problem. That shouldn't have been that way. They should all scale down, but they didn't. Okay? Okay, media queries are going to look kind of like this and much more complicated. I selected a really simple one, but basically you tell it for media screen and then there's max width, min width, there's a whole bunch of terms you could use here and conditions. So it's a feature and then a condition. Okay, that's the way it reads out. Okay, so there's a whole list of like 20 different features, and from those features you can do and you can pile these one on top of another so that you can really zoom in on a certain thing. There are some websites out there that give you sample media queries. So if you're into that, you can type media query snippets, and there are sites out there that have media query snippets and where they explain, okay, if you want to do this, this is your media query. If you want to do this, this is your media query. That'll get you started, understanding how it works. There's nothing better than a few samples to get you kind of, oh, that's how it works. Okay. Any questions on that part? Good, I left you thoroughly, okay.
Bamboozled is the word.
It's really confused, yes.
Really confused. I don't want to know that, but you should know that. You should know at least that much if you're going to be purchasing services from somebody, because you're going to want to go back and look and say, did they do it? Okay.
Did
Maybe
it scale?
It's not working. You want to look at the style sheet, which is just a text document, and go, oh, everything's pixel. Sorry, you didn't do it right. Most websites built up to now are not responsive, just by default. You just have to assume that your site, whatever it is, unless you've built it in the last, 6 or 9 months, is not responsive. Okay, you just have to assume that, unless you just happen to be really in with the in crowd and you've already known about this and you've already been pushing for doing it that way. But if you haven't asked for it, you probably didn't get it. The vast majority of WordPress themes have not been responsive.
Right.
There is now you're finding a lot of them. In the last 6 months, it's exploded, okay, which is good. Ultimately, they should all be responsive. You should be able to go into WordPress and type responsive and get the entire library. I mean, there should be nothing but responsive, okay, but that's not the case, but it will eventually. Anything built before CSS2 came out, which is around 2004 is when the final spec came out, when W3C never actually says, this is the final spec. They have a recommendation, and then they have a this and a that. Their last one is their final recommendation. That's considered the final. And that came out in 2004. They started the CSS2 in 1997, so it took them that long to get to the final recommendation. It's designed by committee. You have all these companies and interests all over the world doing battle. Okay, so that's why it takes so long.
It's a work in progress constantly.
That's right.
It
It's
is.
constantly changing, that's right.
Like democracy.
Yes. Media query support is quite recent, quite recent. In fact, I grabbed a little chart, which I gave you if you want to see more on it, there's http://icanuse.com. It's a good tool if you're doing web development, because then you can say, can I use this? On what browsers? And it will tell you. This is where we are at today. Big arrow. We're finally fully supported all the way across. Okay? These are proposed versions down here. Firefox and Chrome do proposed versions, so you can kind of ignore that pretty much. This is where we're at today. You can see IE8 had very minimal support. 9 finally had what is considered full support, or at least over 90% support. And there it goes from there. So this is where we are at today with our current browsers. So basically, you've got across-the-board support on the current, most recent browsers.
What's the highest percentage of browsers now?
You know, I haven't looked that up. I mean, when I looked that up about a year and a half ago, you know what one of the top ones still is?
IE6.
Depressing. If you've ever tried to do cross-browser support for IE6, well, you have my sympathy. You really do. And if a customer wants you to do it, tell them, multiply any big number you can imagine by 10, and then that might cover it. Because you have no idea what it's going to cost to make their website support IE6.
But one of the reasons behind that too is that with the number of people in the world today who have computers, and there are quite a few third world nations where computers are quite popular. They're older computers.
Older operating
That's
system.
why
That's right.
IE6 is still so popular.
Yeah, it pumps the numbers
Correct.
up. Big time. That's right.
So know where your customers are.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, anyway, you can see that this whole responsive design and mobile is still a work in progress. We're not like there. Okay, we're still kind of struggling with getting everybody to support things and struggling with how it's all going to work. So if you feel like there's confusion in the marketplace, you're right. There is confusion in the marketplace.
Well, it's still a new market though.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. No, I understand that, and that's not a criticism, it's just a
No.
reality.
But that's an explanation for some statistics that I ran across not too long ago that having to do with this. I believe it was 40% of computer users in the United States are young people with mobile. They use mobile, looking for, walking down the street looking for something they're looking for. You know,
It's true.
they're going to go to the spots they can find.
Right,
When they
that's-
go mobile.
Yeah,
They
that's-
will not go to the store that's right in front of them that has a big sign, I have what you need, whatever it is. They won't go there because they're not looking at that.
That's right. And that's why that's why the top thing on your mobile site needs to be the phone button and the map button.
Yep.
And that's why it needs to be there, because that's what they're looking for.
And stated in this book that I read, within the next year, that number will go up to 87%.
Yeah, it's growing crazy. We covered that on the last one too.
Yeah.
Those statistics are incredible.
But that's a user, and they have a totally different intent than a platform user, than a PC user.
Less and
So-
less so. Actually, I was just reading some statistics that as a matter of fact, this one person who was blogging away and throwing out some statistics basically came up with some recent stuff, basically saying that they are doing everything on their mobile device. They're reading stuff. I mean, you name it, what a desktop user, they're doing it on their phone. They're really using it fully. So that's why Google is saying you really need to have the same code base, because the mobile user is moving into a world where they're gonna do everything on the phone. They won't even have a desktop device. They'll go to the library or the internet cafe to get on a big device if they really, really want it. They probably won't even own it. The biggest thing they'll own is a tablet. You know, not a computer at all, you know, from the point of a desktop, you know, with a big screen.
Not even big corporations are exempt from this, and their employees are doing bring your own device, BYOD, where they're using their devices on the corporate network and driving their IT departments absolutely crazy, because you try to secure all of these things.
Well, yeah, and their personal device.
So it's happening really fast, folks, and it's accelerating.
Yeah, your major IT magazines, that's one of the big articles that you see in eWeek and Information Week, I get all those, is struggling with that very problem, struggling with all the devices, all people's own devices, and how do they deal with security and everything. So, okay, next time, this is what we're gonna do. We're going to be looking at using WordPress for a mobile-friendly website. We're going to review mobile enhancement plugins. How can we take your current WordPress site and add mobile things to it by a plugin? Then we're going to look at examples of plugins. We'll actually play with them a little bit. Then we're going to look at themes, what to look for, how to decide a good mobile theme. You know, what kind of features and stuff. We'll play with 2 or 3 of them during the course of the afternoon. And then I'll give you a review as many others that I can dig up between myself and Melanie, who does a lot of the actual WordPress design children. We might even be able to get some sites up of examples too. We'll try to do that. Okay? That's it for today.
Any more questions? All right, you guys all understood that really well.
Queries as well as on a responsive side.
Yes, you will.
I mean, you can do them differently. You don't have to have